to consider the difference between probability and possibility. And in the personal development world, we're excessively focused on what's possible and we completely ignore what's probable.
Totally.
So basically what ends up happening is people set these wildly unrealistic goals. It would be like me saying, you know what, I want to go play in the NBA. I'm a scrawny Indian person. I'm never going to play in the NBA. I could follow LeBron's diet to the letter, go follow his training
You could do
regimen.
his morning routine.
Yeah, I can do everything he does. And I can promise you, I wouldn't even get a pickup game with LeBron James. But that's the thing, is that you see this, right? Because what happens is we use outliers as role models for possibility. And outliers are actually really bad role models for most of us. But nobody says that because outliers are the ones who get all the press.
Who are the world's most interesting people? And what fascinating, groundbreaking, incredible things can they teach us? In this new series, I leave our Science of People lab to interview my favorite authors, experts, and celebrities for them to share their best people hacks, social skills, and stories. And let me tell you, they have some juicy tips. This is a new series I'm calling The World's Most Interesting People.
Hello, YouTube friends. Today we are going to be talking about being unmistakable. And I am so excited to have my longtime friend and amazing entrepreneur and podcaster, Srini Rao, that is the host and the founder of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where he's interviewed more than 1,000 people, ranging from bank robbers to billionaires. That's like the best tagline ever. Guests have included Danielle Laporte, Glenn Beck, Tim Ferriss, Seth Godin, and myself. I was on there too. His new book, which I love, The Art of Being Unmistakable, was a Wall Street Journal bestseller. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Yes.
Actually, that was my self-published book. That was the Wall Street Journal bestseller. But then there was the 2 follow-up books with Penguin, Unmistakable, Why Only is Better Than Best, and Audience of One.
Which, by the way, all of your books are amazing. I just was like, if I only have a few minutes to talk, I want to talk about this idea. And before we get too deep into the questions, what does it mean to be unmistakable? Because I think that everyone who's watching this right now, we all need to be unmistakable. The question is, how do we do it? So what is it?
Well, I think it probably helps to tell you, sort of where the idea came from
Yes,
in order
please.
to really explain the definition. So look, I spent probably 3 to 4 years prior to becoming Unmistakable Creative interviewing bloggers. And I started to notice this pattern where somebody would see something that some other influencer or famous person did, and then they would just go in and try to replicate it. Like I literally saw people copy other people's website designs to the letter. And then they were shocked that they weren't getting the same results. And I'm like, yeah, that's because there's one gigantic variable that throws off every single one of these formulas, and that's you. And so my friend Mars Dorian was really the one to put words around it. And we joked that like we should have given him my book advance because ultimately I ended up capitalizing off of his idea far more than he did. But he said, when I do something, I want it to be so unique that I wouldn't even have to put my name on it and you'd recognize it. So like if you see anything Mars Dorian does, it rolls through your Facebook newsfeed and you're like, there's only one person who could have done that, Mars. And so that was pretty much what formed the entire idea. And so the idea was that you create something so distinctive that nobody else could do it but you. And as a result, your competition becomes completely irrelevant. And so that's kind of the entire ethos of everything we do. So like if somebody else is like, oh, everybody should be on Snapchat, we're like, great, let's not be on Snapchat. So that's really what it is. It's about sort of questioning. I think the thing that really formed this is what I saw was that people didn't model their role models and mentors. Instead, they ended up mimicking and parroting them. And as a result, they created nothing original. And the more that I saw that pattern, the more it pissed me off. And as my friend Terry McMullen says, there's great creative potential at things that make you angry. And it turns out there's a book deal in the things that make you angry.
Okay, I also want to talk about something that makes me angry, now that you brought that up. So it makes me angry when people who have so much creativity and so much brilliance and so much smarts copy because they feel like they can't do better. That is like such a waste of potential. And also it's boring for everyone else. So I think there's like 2 things going on here, which is the first is people who underestimate themselves. And what I wanted to ask you is, how many people do you think are simply underestimating their abilities? And how many people do you think truly have to learn, level up, skill up to be able to create something unique?
Wow, well, given how much research you do, I think your assessment on this would be about 1,000 times more accurate than mine. It's a balancing act. And I think that this is something I've been writing a lot about, and it's largely making me question, even the validity of a lot of the things that I guess say. I mean, that to me has always been the one thing is I come in with skepticism. I think the most important things they've taught me are not to take anything they say as gospel, never to follow any of their advice to the letter, and question it in the validity of the context of my life. right? And that's really important in answering this question, because in some cases, yeah, it's people who need to level up. In others, we can't just say, oh, go level up, go work 4 hours a day on this thing, because people have real responsibilities. And, a woman who taught me this was somebody who attended, one of my courses. And, one of my mentors said, you haven't been in an office in 10 years. Like, you're giving all this productivity advice. And it made me rethink the advice I was giving and say, yeah, you know what, you're right. And she would show up with a baby in tow to our office hours calls. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. She's showing up with an infant. My productivity advice for a woman with an infant is nonsense. She doesn't have an hour every morning to just focus with no interruptions. That's not really accurate. So that's really important here, is to think about this from a context standpoint. So, look, everybody comes to whatever situation they're in with advantages and disadvantages. So I came into this with a lot of outlier advantages, most of which I can't replicate for another person. So that's something to consider is, okay, am I coming to this with certain gifts and talents? Some people are just naturally good at what they do. And so really what you want to think about is not just, is it leveling up, or is it, not believing in yourself? But I think a better way to look at this is something one of my mentors said, is to consider the difference between probability and possibility. And in the personal development world, we're excessively focused on what's possible and we completely ignore what's probable.
Totally.
So basically what ends up happening is people set these wildly unrealistic goals. It would be like me saying, you know what, I want to go play in the NBA. I'm a scrawny Indian person. I'm never going to play in the NBA. I could follow LeBron's diet to the letter, go follow his training regimen.
You could do his morning routine.
Yeah, I can do everything he does. And I can promise you, I wouldn't even get a pickup game with LeBron James. But that's the thing, is that you see this, right? Because what happens is we use outliers as role models for possibility. And outliers are actually really bad role models for most of us. But nobody says that, because outliers are the ones who get all the press. In fact, Paul Graham wrote this great essay on wealth a long time ago. And he said using outliers is actually a really bad idea, because he said, you're not considering people like Bill Gates. Like, he says, you forget that Bill Gates was the beneficiary of one of the biggest blunders in business history. From that point, all he had to do was execute. But he still would have been wealthy, but nowhere as near as wealthy as he is. Timing plays a role. Like, there's all these context factors that play a role when we talk about this idea of success that nobody ever mentions, because we love the idea of seeing some, famous person, because what happens? These are the people that write books. These are the ones that end up on the covers of magazines. Nobody tells you the story about the person who busted their ass for years and amounted to nothing, because those stories don't get the press. But those stories are far more common than the Elon Musk stories. So I think that that's what you have to really think about here, is probability and possibility.
Okay, so I love this, and I see this every single day. Is this a baby step here that I could suggest to our viewers? Is a baby step, okay, you could have role models, but I want you to separate your role models from the outliers and the people who you think are, what's the opposite of an outlier? Successful in a way that's attainable. So what I'm trying to say is, I feel like a baby step for me, right? Like, even just me, is like, I have certain role models that are absolute outliers. It's the probability of me actually doing what they've done when I don't have their skills and I don't have their timing, I don't have their background, is very small. I can still look at them and be inspired by them. But the people that I should be learning from are actually people who are averagely successful. Like, what's the framing around that?
No, I mean, I think that's a really good way to look at it, is to look, you know what it is? Not outliers, what I call realistic models of possibility.
Thank you. Not
is
inlier.
The opposite of an outlier. Yeah. So again, like the thing is that, and that's hard to do given the world that we live in, because, what do? We see everybody's lives online. We're like, oh, that person is amazing. And again, it takes us back to context. Like, go look at what is this person bringing to the table that you don't have, or you do have. So for example, when my mentor said, he said, if you want to build a successful startup, go work at Google first. Don't try to do something that you have no natural advantages in, and go look at some of the most successful founders in Silicon Valley. How many of, like, Twitter guys, Instagram, all Google alumni, like,
right.
So think about it, that you get basically Chris Sacca, Google alumni, who's like a billionaire venture capitalist. You think that sitting in on meetings at Google with lawyers and getting to hear all those pitches didn't hone his, like, ability to pick, winners? Like, there's no question that is a huge leg up that most people don't look at, because we sell this sort of, chase your entrepreneurial dream narrative that I don't think is entirely true for everybody. I think that we've discounted the value of, like, a perfectly normal, quote unquote, life.
Okay, so there's two really, really good action steps here. So the first one we just talked about is separating your aspirational role models where there's low probability that you could match them, and separating out people who you think you could actually learn from in a highly probable way. And the second thing is something you just mentioned, which is to create a training for yourself that's an actual training ground so you can learn the skills that you need to be unmistakable. And that might not be just jumping in and starting. That might be going where people that you've found inspiring go. It also could be going in the places where you could learn the skills that you need to level up, whatever those might be. So making a list of those skills, like very actionable, guys, like make a list, pull out a pen and paper. I want you to write down 5 people who you find aspirational, 5 people who you can relate to, you think have succeeded in a realistic way. And then I want you to write down 5 skills that you think you need to learn to begin to level up your skills in a way that could actually be serving your bigger purpose. I want to ask, in your book, what I loved is the examples. Other than Mars, which is an amazing example, what other examples do you think are really inspiring people to keep in their head as they begin to think about making themselves unmistakable, making their work unmistakable, making their assets unmistakable, making their resume unmistakable? Are there this couple in real people?
Several. Yeah, so I think the 2 that immediately came to mind were my friend AJ Leon and a graffiti artist named Eric Wall. So AJ Leon really was a huge influence on the way that I've thought about sort of, the way we create our work. So if you download any of our free ebooks, you'll see they look nothing like a free ebook should look. They're beautiful, they're illustrated. All of that came from AJ Leon. It was just like, why would you make a PDF that everybody else makes when you could do all of this? It was just, wow, this is what's actually possible.
And we're going to you'll give me links below the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those links. So if you want to see exactly what Srini's talking about, I'll put them below the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, like we've turned the podcast into animated shorts. We did a series with Soul Pancake, like all that kind of stuff. And the thing is that so often we're quick to look to what other people are doing, which takes us back to that whole idea. And it's like, oh, best practice. But AJ was one of those people where, when AJ had a conference, he custom illustrated every single name tag. Like, who does that? I did that when we had a conference and we never threw away the name tags. Like, I remember this girl I was dating at the time saw the mock-up. She's like, nobody's ever going to throw those away. I said, yeah, I know, that's the point.
Right.
And it's
that is an example. That is a great practical example. I hope, friends, you're hearing these and this is inspiring other name tags in your life, right? You're not throwing a conference with name tag. That's not the point. But you're thinking, I have a name tag version in my life that you could say, I could do something that people aren't going to throw away. Like,
the example that I just thought of, this is a really funny one from the book, was Cards Against Humanity. When they did their Black Friday campaign, they literally sent boxes of shit to people. And, and people, and the thing is that ridiculous PR stunt led to so much free publicity, like millions of dollars in free press, like people making unboxing videos, news outlets writing about them. And think about how many retail outlets are competing for press on Black Friday. All of them want somebody to pay attention. And these guys send people boxes of shit and they basically become, a media sensation. So I think that really, to me, is sort of, the essence of this is, okay, like, what is everybody else doing? Ryan Holiday had a really interesting way of phrasing this when I was asking about book marketing. And this question always stayed with me. He said, how are you going to make a large, unignorable statement?
Oh, how are you going to make a large, unignorable statement? Gosh, Ryan is like a fountain of wisdom. We love him, by the way. He's also on the channel. You got to go check out his video. We're going to broadcast that with a big banner because that's so good. That's the question we should be asking ourselves every time we sit down to do goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think that absolutely is true. I mean, it's something I think about with everything that we create is, and keep in mind, like, there's a difference between making noise and making a large unignorable statement, because plenty of people are good at making noise. Just go scroll through your Facebook newsfeed. Everybody's good at making noise.
Yeah.
Whereas a statement makes an impact, and there's a big difference. And I think it's really easy to confuse attention with impact and attention with like real accomplishment, especially when you can just be validated all day long.
So here's my last question for you, which is, I want everyone to check out the book. Hopefully this is going to get them started. What's one baby step you can send people off into the sunset with, that they just watch this video, they have some creative juice, they have some energy. What can they do that's a little step that will get them on the right path for being unmistakable?
Yeah, I think largely it's about expressing your creativity in some way, even if it's in a small way. It might be writing in a journal, every single day. It might be taking a picture every day. Like, these small things, they add up. The thing that we have that's problematic is that we tend to undervalue incremental change, because, you don't get to make like some grand announcement about quitting your job on Facebook, the way you do about incremental change. Like nobody gives a damn that I sat down and wrote 1,000 words this morning because I do that every day. It's like incredibly mundane.
Yeah.
And usually it's the mundane things you do on a daily basis that lead to extraordinary changes over a lifetime. And it's not these huge moments in the spotlight, because those are all fleeting anyways, as you know, from being a published author. You spend 2 years writing a book, you spend 2 days talking about it. And that's the reality of this. So you want to think about the 2 years, not the 2 days.
Okay, everyone, I hope that this has begun to stimulate some interesting creative juices. I hope that you'll really take to heart those action steps that we talked about. We'll also put a little summary below the video. Please, please, please go check out the book. Also, definitely download the free ebook so you can get a sense for how this work can stand out in a really different way. If you aren't already subscribed to Srini's podcast, you must go subscribe to it. We will also link to that in the show notes. I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Woohoo! All right, thanks everyone. Be sure to like this video in the comments, put your ideas for how you think you can start being unmistakable. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks for watching. Bye everyone.
Are you living up to your full potential? Do you want more? I would love to help you. Get started with my free training and learn more about People School today. Visit scienceofpeople.com/pschool. Hey there, don't miss any of my next videos. Tap the bell next to the subscribe button and get alerted when my next amazing video can come your way.